What we present is how we employ the SFL-based appraisal framework to analyze digital discourse in language other than English, in this case, Macedonian, a South Slavic language, focusing on a socially relevant topic, the COVID-19 pandemic. We build upon our previous analysis of one argumentative internet forum discussion, but we are interested only in the system of engagement here. The discussion we analyze is part of an internet forum, mainly represented by female users. The forum can be considered a community of practice, since it is an aggregate of people who come together around mutual engagement in discussions on a variety of topics. The discourse on the forum is semi-interactive and involved. This forum shares features with other similar platforms in that it supports asynchronous, semi-public, anonymous, many-to-many communication. Forum users participate in discussions by contributing posts, which are messages that can vary in length, are predominantly textual, but multimodal means are present as well, and which once posted in the discussion thread become permanent and visible to anyone on the internet. On the forum, posts are organized chronologically in discussion threads, starting with an initial post which sets the topic of discussion. The forum allows discussants to cite a part of a previous post, which is then embedded in their post, or to directly reply to a previous post, which makes it visible what the following posts are commenting on or replying to. Only registered users can participate in discussions. Upon registration, discussants accept to comply to a set of rules for proper behavior on the forum, and adherence to the rules is visible throughout the discussions. Moreover, the forum is regulated by administrators and moderators, but it is evident that discussants themselves act to moderate discussions and sanction unwanted behavior. The data for our analysis consists of a middle-sized discussion thread titled "The Connection Between the Coronavirus and the 5G Network." It is set on the largest Macedonian internet forum, femina.mk, classified under the section Health. It consists of a total of 351 posts contributed by 66 participants over a period of 62 days. The majority of the posts, however, over 90%, were in fact contributed in the first week of the discussion initiation. Our unit of analysis here is a single contribution that is a post. The topic is controversial, and this discussion is argumentative in nature, since from the very beginning, participants take a clear position towards the topic, either supporting the theory of COVID-19 5G relatedness or opposing it. Therefore, we classify discussants in three groups: supporters, opponents, and a group of uncertain. Discussants' activity in the discussion also varies, so we classify them in active if contributing more than 10 posts, semi-active if contributing 2 to 9 posts, and inactive if contributing only 1 post. Table 1 here shows that most participants opposed the topic, that is, were classified in the group of opponents, and they also contributed the most posts. There were significantly fewer supporters, but they were the most active, contributing an average of 11 posts per participant. The posts we marked as uncertain were fewer and showed irregular patterns. And figure 1 here shows the layout of the discussion thread on the forum. It shows the first 2 posts in the discussion thread with the second post directly replying to the first one. This option allowed us to follow which posts are replied to in subsequent discourse. As mentioned in the beginning, our analysis builds up on previous studies we conducted on this discourse. So what we already know about the discourse we analyzed in terms of evaluation is that participants in the discussion adopt mainly negative attitude towards other participants and towards what they share. Most present evaluations are judgments of incapacity, inveracity, and impropriety on the part of the participants. Affect is mainly expressed in the form of insecurity, unhappiness, and dissatisfaction by participants' behavior, as well as by the general socioeconomic situation. And appreciation is rare, mainly in the form of negative evaluation of the discussion itself and of sources shared. We also know that discussants engage in highly contractive discourse with denial, pronouncement, and concurrence as most frequent strategies they employ. But what we further investigate here is how these strategies combine in patterns and for what purposes. To determine how discussants position themselves in the discussion, we started from the leading questions proposed in Martin and White 2005. First, is the addresser presenting the current proposition as one which has no dialogistic alternatives which need to be recognized or engaged with in the current communicative context? Or is the addresser's voice acting to expand the dialogic space by positioning itself so as to allow for or invite alternative positions? Or is the addresser's voice acting to contract the dialogic space by positioning itself so as to restrict or exclude alternative positions? By answering these questions, we are able to categorize posts as monoglossic, as exemplified in 1, which only provides a statement. We discussed later that these were rare, heteroglossic but expansive, as in 116, which presents a claim as one of a number of possible explanations, and finally heteroglossic but contractive, as in 7, which openly negates a previous claim. The number of examples here is in fact the number these posts take in the thread. The engagement system, as defined in Martin and White 2005, which probably is the most comprehensive description of it to date, is a complex one, and there are a number of strategies under each of these categories. In our data, monoglossic utterances were rare, so we'll focus here only on heteroglossic ones. Martin and White propose a number of linguistic resources that perform a certain contractive or expansive function in the discourse in English. And in our data in Macedonian, we found similar strategies instantiated here in figure 3. We found sentential as well as partial negation in the function of denial, adversatives performing countering, plenty of rhetorical questions requiring no answer, locutions of the type of course, and concessions of the type it's true that bad, categorized as concurrence. Under pronouncement, we found means peculiar to the medium, such as quotation marks, capital letters, emojis, repeated punctuation, but also inserted phrases such as "I'm dead serious about this." Endorsement was more challenging to distinguish from the expansive attribution, since same or similar expressions were employed. We relied on context and cotext here to decide whether a source is being endorsed or only acknowledged. Alternatives were entertained in a number of modalities similar to English, but under entertainment, we also considered open questions of the type, is it true that? Acknowledging sources was also specific to the medium. Often only a link was shared with no particular position taken towards it. But in distancing, most frequent was a grammatical category not present in English, the distancing evidential L form. We performed our analysis in a spreadsheet, manually extracting and annotating posts, and table 2 here illustrates how the analysis of the initial post was done. We work with the original language. Translation is provided here only for illustration. We had separate columns for the participant's username and the post number, then the number of posts that participant contributed, the participant's orientation towards the topic, and then a column for strategies of contraction, another one for expansion, and one for bare statements. We'd like to highlight here the positioning of the initiator. They show awareness that a controversial topic might not be wanted for discussion on the forum, so they employ denial to disallow for the form some prospective posts might take in not opinions of the type "this is nonsense," which is then followed by the countering but signaling that the wanted form is facts and arguments. This contractive part is preceded by the entertaining maybe, suggesting that the theory proposed might not be valid and that alternative positions are possible. But as we argue later, this deny plus counter positioning of the initiator sets the tone for subsequent posts. With this type of analysis, we aim to provide answers to the following questions. What engagement strategies do discussants employ and how? What patterns of strategies are present? What influences the choice of these patterns? Are the patterns peculiar to groups of participants based on their orientation towards the topic? And what is the role of the controversial topic? We present quantitative data as an orientation to the presence of each strategy throughout the groups of participants. As tables 3 and 4 here show, there are no significant differences in the use of engagement strategies in the two largest groups, opponents and supporters. Only the group of discussants not taking a certain position showed irregular patterns, which we attribute to the low number of tags. Denial is the single most present strategy in both supporters and opponents, closely followed by pronouncement and concurrence. We therefore proceed now to discuss patterns of positioning in the discussion in general, and we later provide some conclusions as answers to the questions we start with. The most common pattern of the logistic positioning we found in the discussion present in posts by both supporters and opponents is explicit denial of previous claims of the unlike-minded participants, aided by pronouncement, which is capitalized letters in 7, in order to prevent similar claims to be made again in the discussion. In 7, we have the virus is not made in a lab, viruses are not made, just like that. Second most common pattern is correction of previous claims of the unlike-minded discussants, again, followed by countering and preceded by endorsement in order to clarify and strengthen self-position and attack the other. In post 326, we have open the links in English, there is Google Translate, and read what world-class scientists claim before you deny it. You aren't denying me, but the authorities. As a reaction to 296, which we tracked with the help of the reply function we discussed above. These examples also illustrate how the affordances of the forum as a medium shape the discourse. 326 mentions links they provided previously. The link's content is explicitly endorsed here, but it is also clear that discussant expects this source to be taken as an authoritative source, even when only shared previously. Discussants mostly acknowledge this practice and consider the position of sources shared. Third frequent pattern was that of countering prospective positions that are expected not to take a wanted or expected form and content in order to shape discourse in wanted direction. We mentioned that we have such a pattern in the very first post, write something that supports or denies this, but with facts and arguments. This is then repeated in a number of subsequent posts of opponents too. In post 54, an active opponent contributes the following. No one is pouring scorch on you and laughing at you, but when you share such thesis, then give me proofs to convince me. That is how you debate, and not with what I read, I think so, and so on. These two posts also tell us that there are some common norms for appropriate behavior on the forum, which to some degree match the forum rules and regulations, and which then act to shape the discourse. Discussants ask for a constructive debate. They seem to allow for alternative positions to exist, but they act to constrict the possibilities for unsupported and inept propositions to be shared, especially since the topic is a serious one. We also see that some behavior and some type of positioning is attributed to the culture. Fourth common pattern was to rhetorically question claims of unlike-minded participants, and rhetorical questions were in fact one of the most frequent strategies used in order to confront them or even to criticize them, as in post number 68. Facebook is the source of truth, didn't you know that till now? Which follows a sequence of posts related to a shared Facebook source. Here again, we have the issue with the external sources shared, and once again, they are expected to be taken as endorsed by the discussants sharing them, without the need for them to explicitly state the endorsement. Another pattern we found was aligning with previous claims, but often partially to avoid direct disagreement, but then countering at least some aspect of these claims to still remain faithful to self and group views. As in 155, It is true that 5G is not well studied, but to say such a thing, one needs to be competent and not have someone who doesn't even know what an electromagnetic field is act as an expert. These two posts also illustrate how two different styles of discussants expressing themselves and highlight which features of the forum influence their expression. 150 directly addresses a single discussant, and we found that a number of participants act as if they are unaware that the discussion is public and can be read by any internet users and not only the discussants engaged in the thread. While 155, on the other hand, takes a more impartial and distanced position, addressing the other discussant as someone, and this is an approach that would be expected if a wider, non-responsive audience is in mind. There is also first acknowledging of a position to align with a generally held view before countering and denial are introduced. Finally, we discuss one more pattern with expansive strategies. We mentioned above that expansion was less frequent and often combined with contractive strategies than found alone. And even if an utterance could be classified as expansive on its own, the surrounding context often suggested that it should be understood as such with some reserve, as often irony or sarcasm were present. In 12, there is entertaining of the possibility for different positions or for self-position to be one of many or possibly not valid, in order to soften the tone, save face, avoid clash and or criticism, and adhere to forum rules. It says, if the first 5G antennae are set up in China, Italy, and Spain, shouldn't the USA also be on this list? It is the most affected country, so it somehow makes sense if your theory is right, at least if you ask me. And yes, one more thing, if it is true, which I think it isn't, but okay, let's suppose it is, why would they distract us with a virus? Although this post can be summarized in I don't think your theory is true, we see that the discussant here employs a number of strategies to still show allowance for even the smallest chance for alternative position, the alternative position that is the theory is true to be valid. This, we would argue, is a wanted type of positioning on the forum because it adheres to the forum rules for a constructive discussion, allows for alternatives, but still contributes a personal view on the topic discussed. It additionally does not directly challenge previous nor prospective discussants and presents self-position as open to negotiation. With this as the final pattern discussed, we now proceed to some conclusions. The analysis shows that most present pattern of the logistic positioning in this argumentative internet forum discussion on COVID-19 in Macedonian is contraction of discussants' opportunities to express an alternative position, mainly by disclaiming, that is denying, similar existing or prospective positions, and additionally by proclaiming, mainly pronouncing, self or emerging group positions. The choice of the logistic strategies in the discussion appears to be initially influenced by features of the forum as a medium and as a community, and additionally by the argumentative nature of the discussion set with the controversial topic and with the content and form of the initial post. It is later also influenced by the local communicative situation that develops, opposing the validity of the theory proposed, arguing for adherence to forum rules, endorsing external sources, and so on. The patterns of the logistic positioning seem to also be more dependent on the above-mentioned factors and less so on discussants' orientation towards the topic and on their active participation in the discussion. These last two factors seem to determine who and what gets evaluated, not how, since similar patterns can be found in different groups, as the quantitative data indicated. The topic thereby thereby the theory of COVID-19 and 5G network relatedness is evaluated by most discussants as inapt and unsubstantiated and therefore unwanted on the forum. We see the topic and the way it is set as the trigger for the patterns of contractive strategies employed by discussants in this thread. And we thank you for your attention.